Our next question is, how much do politicians care about opinions of people who can't vote for them? I live in Ohio, work in Kentucky, and was born and raised in Tennessee. I'm a product of the Tennessee public school system. Of course, I can only vote in Ohio. Will it do any good if I call Congresspeople in Kentucky and Tennessee to voice my opinion?
So this is a tough question, the one I dealt with today, because we probably had 400 people call about Cincinnati becoming, or Cincinnati is a sanctuary city. And we always ask, some little background information about where you live, and I would say 90% of the people do not live in the city. And so it's a tough one. You know, we have to listen to everybody, and I read every single email that we get. But obviously I was elected to represent the 300,000 people who do live in the city. And they do have probably different values than people who live in Westchester or Blue Ash. So I think that it's a tough question that we have to listen and let those people be heard regardless of where you live, but also understand what your role is and what you were elected to do. And you were elected because the people that you represent thought that your values matched their values enough. I always say that I don't like the term flip-flopper because we should promote politicians who learn. So you shouldn't have your beliefs when you were 18 shouldn't be your beliefs when you're 40 because you've had a lot of experiences, you've listened to people and heard their stories, and so if someone changes their opinion, that should be a good thing. And so listening to those people regardless of where they live is part of that, but still staying true to who you are and knowing the reasons that people elected you to begin with.
I think it depends upon the subject matter. So Chris is right. You want to listen to your constituents. They're the ones who are going to be affected by the vote that you're going to be making. But on certain issues, having an outside perspective, I think, is important, especially if the community where they're from have the same issue and they've been able to address it in a very substantial way. And so learning what that community's done is important. So it comes down to the issue. But again, I think it's a real hard balancing act. And I think, as I said in my earlier comment, too many times on really big issues, like right now, our elected officials in D.C. and at the state level and at the city level are getting bombarded with emails and phone calls. And at some point in time, it may come down to a judgment call on their part as to how they vote, and hopefully through their life experiences and the learning that they've done, they make the right decision.
Yeah, I guess I don't make a distinction. If you're in Hamilton County, or if you don't live in Hamilton County, you may still come across the Hamilton County justice system if you do business here. We have 75 and 71 major thoroughfares. There are people interacting with the services that I'm primarily interested in, the courts, that don't live here. And if you don't live in a community where you're trying to create change, that should not forestall you from doing that. The Republicans do a great job of this, frankly. The Koch brothers don't live all over the United States, and yet their impact is felt nationwide. So from an activist perspective, that should not stop you from speaking up and speaking out and trying to create change in communities that you may not be living in.
I think one thing I'm learning is that it is a balancing act, but I think no one has like the monopoly on good ideas. So something might be new to Cincinnati, but it might not be new to the world. So I think you should be open to listening to people who have different opinions about how things should go, particularly if it's an issue that another city or another place is doing well. One of the things that part of what my campaign manager Kevin and I we do is that if we have a really good idea, immediately we go and look and see what other city is doing this and doing it well. So I think there is some value to listening to other people, but to a point where it's, to Chris's point, it is a balancing act and it's not, or it's not constructive, but I think if you really know your constituent base and you have a relationship with your constituency and you know the communities that you serve, you're kind of able to differentiate, what you're hearing and how you think that will affect your community. But I come across people all the time when I'm, shaking hands and kissing babies because that's just what I do. I come across a lot of people and they'll say, well, I don't live in the city. I still don't know your name. I still want to know what your idea is. I don't think that, just because you're outside, if you're in Wyoming or if you're in Blue Ash, you might not have a good idea. You just may, I don't know everything. There's some areas that I'm just not aware of. So I think that's what we have to, try to strike that balance. And in terms of when you're picking up calls, because I've been, in City Hall and know what those calls are like and having to, so you just kind of have to, it's kind of hard to say, oh, what's your zip code? Sorry, I can't help you. You can't really do that. So you kind of have to, take it all, and you have to kind of listen to it all. And then it's kind of almost like, there's opportunities where you get to be like a sponge, and then you get to pan for gold. And so those situations where you're, it's not your direct constituency. That's kind of when you're panning for gold and looking for those bits of advice. But if you don't receive everything, you may not get the gold that you're looking for. So you kind of, it is time consuming, but you have to be open to listen to what everybody has to say.
We don't screen calls if you're not from 5130 or 614 area code. We do take all of our calls, and just speaking from a casework perspective, there are times, for example, when I worked on VA and military casework, we'd have constituents from Kentucky or Indiana call, and they would go to the Cincinnati VA. So there are certain areas where we still communicate with folks despite not being in Ohio. And also, if we get calls from people of other states that just, love Senator Brown and they want his assistance, we can still communicate with other senators. So we do refer people to the senators of their state, but that is an option, and don't hesitate calling just because you're not from Ohio or you don't feel like your voice is going to be heard, or we won't be able to help you because you don't live in the state.
Great. Our next question is,